The Sultan watched the Crusader army retreat from Jerusalem and tracked their movements as Richard and his men moved back to Acre. Word eventually came in mid-July that Richard was off fighting near Beirut. This was precisely what Saladin had been waiting for. He knew the time had come to act. On July 26, 1192, his forces arrived at Jaffa. A siege commenced the very next day, and the fighting became intense. While the garrison of the city was able to put up a fierce defense, it eventually had to retreat to the citadel. However, they did manage to get word out to Richard for help. The king, in response, quickly gathered 54 knights, 500 infantry, and 2,000 crossbowmen and set sail for Jaffa. 6 days into the siege, Richard arrived at Jaffa with 35 ships, eager to get into the fight. And wearing armor that only covered the upper half of his body, he jumped into the water and came ashore with his men. Their assault came directly into the Muslim flank. The attack came so suddenly and so unexpectedly that Saladin's men broke and ran. The Sultan looked on again with disbelief. He outnumbered the king by 4 to 1, and yet it was the Ayyubid soldiers that were running for their lives. In the subsequent days, Saladin regrouped his men east of Jaffa and attempted to conceal them in a field for a surprise attack at dawn. But as fate would have it, a Genoese soldier who was out for a morning walk discovered them. When alerted of this incoming attack, Richard took his badly outnumbered troops and created a wall of long spikes that he drove into the ground, which was a great deterrent to a cavalry charge. Behind this, he positioned his heavily armored crossbowmen, with his knights held back in reserve. When the Ayyubid attack came, it wasn't able to penetrate this line. Instead, Saladin's lightly armored horsemen took horrendous casualties, as they were simply mowed down by a shower of unrelenting crossbow bolts. And then, when they were staggered, Richard launched his knights into a fierce counterattack into the center of Saladin's line. The shock and awe of this attack crushed the Muslim center. The battle then devolved into a brawl, and in the middle of all this, Richard fought on brilliantly. However, at one point, his horse was shot out from beneath him. When Saladin saw his great opponent on foot fighting alongside his men, his sense of chivalry overtook him. He was recorded as saying, "How can this be that a king should be on foot with his men? It cannot be." And then turning to his brother, he said, "Go take these 2 Arabian horses and lead them to him. Tell him that I send them to him, that a man so great as he should not be on foot with his men." Richard graciously accepted the gift and then proceeded to exceed his own reputation as a warrior. Reston gives this justice, quote, "The battle continued and spread into the town itself. Before long, so many arrows had struck into Richard's armor that he looked like a porcupine. He was completely surrounded by the enemy, one against the multitude, and yet he emerged from a pile of dead unscathed. An emir on a richly caparisoned horse and frustrated at Richard's flair, genius, and almost supernatural skill in battle, charged the king, only to have not only his head but half his shoulder and right arm sliced off with it. The Muslim fighters recoiled at this ghoulish sight. As the day wore on, they gave Richard a wide berth, for the king had become a one-man killing machine. He had personified his name. He was the Lionheart. End quote.